Do you ever feel do you ever feel like your life is in limbo where you're looking for a new direction? And so
That's
when we're talking about a direction,
okay.
like the proms or combating sex trafficking or the numerous other things you've done, how much time,
Well,
what am I trying to ask here? I'm trying to ask how much time
I can
will
take
you
some of those one
spend?
by one.
What's that?
I can take some of them one by one because they're all different stories of how we got into them.
How much time do you spend contemplating your God to move
Well,
into a certain direction? Now,
well, with
now
my,
something like like purchasing the girls, like I wasn't in that situation, but I could imagine that that's an immediate action. You don't have time to think or
you know,
ponder on it.
that's right.
Is this really what you want me to do?
That's right.
And so when I'm talking about like a bigger picture of moving into the direction of any of the things that I just named,
Yeah,
how much time will you spend
a lot.
thinking, is this really what you want me to do?
A,
So, just in Genesis and Exodus, there are multiple examples of this. It gets back to what I started off with. You do exactly what you're told to do when you're told to do it. So, immediately, unless you're given a timeline, you do it immediately. Now, the Ark of the Covenant, the building of the Ark of the Covenant, does contain some very interesting addendums to that. Moses is up on Mount Sinai and he gets all these dimensions and schematics and plans and everything else and materials for building the place of meeting, building the altar, building like the curtains and exactly what materials they were supposed to be made out of, what colors and what kind of wood and all of this information. And he comes down to the people and he relays all that he learned to the people and says, okay, this is what you're supposed to do. And multiple times in multiple passages, he reminds the people, because God reminded him, you are to obey the Sabbath. You are to obey the Sabbath. So when you are doing all of this work and you're responding to it immediately, you still take your days of rest. And I know that you really struggle with taking time off. How do I turn off? How do I turn off? I would say start with a Sabbath. No phone. If you want to go outside and grill some food or something that takes your mind off of everything and you're just focused on the task, go do that. Maybe it's fishing, maybe it's hunting, maybe it's sighting in a scope. I don't know. But you do something that is inherently relaxing, that's just for you, that isn't work, and you do not think about work. You look into what the concept of the Sabbath really was and what it entailed, and don't go full legalistic on it, but understand the spirit of it. Take a day of rest. Even when you're doing the urgent work, take a day of rest. I have heard you say, if you're not training, then the enemy's training to kill you. Part of your journey, Sean, is going to be learning to trust the Lord that He will protect you. And so you need to let go of that old mantra that kept you alive. It served a purpose. But now it is time to transition to, I will do what the Lord asks me on the Lord's timetable, including taking days of rest when I do nothing, when I'm not training, when I'm not focusing on getting better, because I have faith that He will use that as He needs to, and I will end up where I need to be. Let go of that control, give it to Him. He's better at it than you are. As to the question about discernment and how do you know if you're getting duped or being led astray, understand that you have the moral character demonstrated already when the Hurricane Helene misinformation came on your show. I'll play that clip now.
I have to set the record straight on something. There was some misinformation put out on my podcast, The Sean Ryan Show, in regards to the Hurricane Helene episode. And I need to set the record straight on that. It was put out on the podcast that Vice President Harris went to North Carolina to pose on a C-17, that's a cargo plane full of supplies that were never intended to reach the hurricane victims. That's how it was put out on the podcast. Friday morning, we received a message on social media from a crew member on that bird, that plane, that said that that was only partially true, The supplies never left that day because that specific plane broke down. They ushered the supplies to a different plane, and that was delivered the very next day. Now, I reached back out to my guest to reconfirm with his source, which was an officer in that National Guard unit, that the original story was correct, and the source did confirm that the story of the bird never intending to leave was correct. Well, now it's Sunday morning, and more news has developed, to include the flight logs of those birds in a statement released by the National Guard unit. And so I need to correct the error here. Those supplies were, yes, they were delivered to the hurricane victims. And I want to say something. You know, we live in a time where I think a lot of people are getting information from podcasts because they don't believe the mainstream media. And I'm one of them. But if we put out misinformation, guess what? We're no better than the mainstream. And so that's something you guys need to think about when you're putting information out. And when you're an active service member putting misinformation out. That's a disgrace. And yes, I do have my own biases and opinions, but I would never, ever, ever put my own biases and opinions above my own honesty and integrity. Because without that, you have nothing. You have a world where you can't believe anything you see or hear, which is very similar to what we're living in right now. I started this podcast to be a beacon of truth, to bring real news to as many people as they want to watch. And I would never intentionally put out misinformation. And so my apologies to everyone that was affected by that and everybody that watched that and believed that false information. And so this is me setting the record straight. I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
What that video shows is that when you get something wrong, when you are duped, you have the integrity to come out and say, hey, I was duped, I made a mistake, I got this wrong. And here's the information that I validated to make sure that I am actually right this time. That's huge, man. It's absolutely huge. Now, you do need to follow Captain Brad Geary's advice and get in that Bible and understand what it's saying and understand what the rules are. You know, can you recite the 10 Commandments? Can you recite not just the short lines that you see on, you know, things you could put in your house, but the actual full text of like, this is what it means, this is why you do it? Can you read about the rules of being ritually clean and unclean in Exodus and understand like, oh, hey, a clay pot that isn't glazed, once you put animal stuff in it, there's no way to get the bacteria out of the clay. That's why the clay pot is to be destroyed. But if you use a copper pot, you can clean that, but you have to scrub it really well. Like, we call this germ theory in 2025, but in the old world, they called it clean and unclean. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, when you are duped, part of it is sometimes the lesson is for you and sometimes the lesson is for everybody else. I don't think you liked getting duped during Hurricane Helene, but I think everybody else liked seeing that when you are duped, you will come out and say, hey, I screwed up, my bad. That's all we want. That's all anybody wants. In the start of Leviticus, they talk about accidental sins and how do you atone for them. Sean, that's an accidental sin. It happens. It's okay. There's a method.